Welcome everyone. My name is Lorraine Galvis. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm here live at FINCON 23 in New Orleans, and I'm joined by an amazing gentleman who I actually met an hour ago at one of our sessions, Chubb. Chad is a certified financial planner, and I didn't know this existed, but a certified student loan professional. He has his own company, WealthKeel LLC, which he founded in 2015. And unlike myself, who's an attorney, and I work a lot with other attorneys and entrepreneurs, you work a lot with physicians. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome. Please tell us a little bit about your company. I got to hear a little bit about it in your session, but tell us what you do and, fill us in.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I mean, our relationship is so fresh, so this is awesome to be doing this live so quickly. I think you did a great job on that. I would say intros are always weird for me, but founded WealthKeel many years ago. Our unique part is that we work with physicians. So Lorraine and I obviously hit it off on the topic of student loans, and that's what brought us here today. But smaller practice, highly specialized in physicians. Student loans are one of our nerdiest topics we have. So looking forward to building on it.
Amazing. Thank you, Chad. So as many of you who watch me, follow me, hear my rants, hear all my emotional displays of affection for student loans and student loan reform, one of the conversations I had with Chad earlier was that entrepreneurs, there's a big gap in the audience as far as student loan forgiveness and student loan cancellation. And so not surprisingly, there's a lot of misinformation out there about some of these programs. So Chad, you work with physicians, and granted we're entrepreneurs and we don't qualify for forgiveness and some of these other programs that are currently being pushed by the government, but so you work with physicians. What are some of your initial steps? Are your clients coming to you, and is student loans a topic of conversation? Does that factor into their wealth plan?
Yeah, and I guess we should even add on to it. So we say physicians, but in reality, it's younger physicians. So we used to say Gen X, Gen Y physicians. So student loans are a part of life, and right. as you can attest to as an attorney and your audience, it's not like $50,000 of student loans. We're talking numerous six figures.
6 figures, folks.
Our largest household was 7 figers. We've had $1 million, a few dual physician households, and I mean, it's out there. It's not that crazy, but we've had 7-figure households. One of those physicians just got forgiveness for half of it, and it was our biggest forgiveness that we ever had through public service loan forgiveness. So yeah, student loans we go into every relationship knowing there's probably a student. Like when someone says they don't have student loans, it's actually more shocking to us than if they're like, we have $1 million of student loans. So
right.
Yes, it's a part of our DNA. I mean, and some of the conversations I had after you and I were done speaking was some of the other individuals that came up was just student loan planning is such a large value add now. And that was even before all the current updates. Now right. The updates are happening so frequently, we pay attention to it daily, and it's hard for us to keep up with it. So, I think one of the reasons why you and I hit it off so well was just because it's so hard to keep up with it, and then it's so complicated, and there's so much technical jargon from legal speak, but just
Absolutely.
Even, does this program qualify? What does this mean? What does that mean? So yes, in short, student loans are, unfortunately part of life with all new clients right now with the physician background.
Absolutely, and I just want to highlight something really important that you said, Chad. You are looking at 2 licensed professionals, right? Financial space, legal space. And to say that the jargon in some of these student loan policies, and I've read a lot of them, the PAY program, the IBR program, the ICR program, the IDR program, the SAVE plan, I mean, what's next? I am an attorney, and my job is to read and analyze and interpret what I'm reading and analyzing so that a 5-year-old, anyone can understand it in plain English. And folks, I have trouble understanding what some of these policies say. In fact, some of my videos are to dispel, well, I won't say dispel, but I want my viewers to read the fine print on these plans. They are not without strings, one, and they do promise some relief, but not all. So I really wanted you, Chad, here to just provide some perspective, because especially in the case of entrepreneurs where most of us don't qualify for forgiveness, I think we try to think of options. Many of my friends in the medical profession, the amount of student loan debt is so overwhelming that I've heard everything from, I'm not paying it. A friend of mine works for a state hospital in New York and is close to forgiveness, but has no life for the last 10 years, and they just started a family. I think I told you a little bit about them. And other friends of ours are paying exorbitant rent in New York because they don't qualify for a mortgage. I mean, it really is a ripple effect. Are you seeing this also with your clients? And I'm thinking surgeons are millionaires, and that's not necessarily the case. Like, you know, maybe some are, but we're dealing with some really heavy stuff with student loans.
Yeah, I know I made this joke to you earlier, but you know, we come to our clients a lot and we'll say, like, younger physicians come to us with 3 mortgages, right? You have student loan payments, which even if you're on income-driven repayment plan at those income levels, especially when you're into attending, you know, residents, fellows, maybe you got a little bit of a break there, but eventually it's going to jump up on you. You have your actual mortgage or your rent, and then if you're, you know, we work with a lot of young families, now plug in childcare, right? You have 3 mortgage payments as a young professional while you're still trying to save up for something called retirement at some point. You don't want to rent anymore, right? You'd like to buy a home at some point.
Right.
And I mean, we could go down a whole nother rabbit hole on that. There's a reason why we chose that group to work with, and it's complicated, right? And we love that. For us, it's a chance to really come in and help them and provide that value. But it's crazy how complicated it's gotten. If you would have told me 5 years ago student loan planning would be one of your biggest value adds as an advisor, I think not just me, but most advisors would say, no way, no way it ever gets that crazy. And now it's
a big part of your business.
It's crazy. I mean, it's and again, you know, talking with you, and you know, I know you'll have Adam as another guest too.
Right.
Like even the smartest attorneys in the student loan space, like we still sit here, we scratch our head, and we're like, does it mean that? Does it work this way?
Right.
Will it work that way? And that's the hardest part right now. Like we literally will give advice, and we will tell our clients, like, that's how it's currently worded.
Right.
Will it hold up? Who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, and these things have been changing, which it's interesting because at Chad's session, he was saying just how much content student loans discussions provide, because literally, and I know this because I read this stuff, right? And I'm looking for my own. Everyone who's watching knows that I've been very public about how much money I owed. I owed $228,000 in student loans. So you're talking about direct loans, unsubsidized Stafford loans. I paid off all my subsidized Stafford loans because the interest was 0. So I said, well, let me get those first. Let me create some momentum to continue paying these. And during COVID, many of you know I'm a breast cancer survivor. I got it twice. The second year I got it was during COVID. And so, smart Lorraine, planning for an emergency, I had disability benefits. And I used my private supplemental disability benefits to pay off over $37,000 in student loans. The problem was only $10,000 of that went to principal.
No.
And I was furious. Folks, I literally almost jumped off the terrace of my high-rise apartment in New York City because I felt powerless. I felt like, and I shared this with Adam yesterday, and I'm like, I'm so glad that there's another lawyer here, character and fitness, that helped me keep it all together. I'm like, Adam, I almost lost it. But I wanted to channel that in a way that could help others, because if I don't understand this, and it's my job to understand this, then what could I expect from my clients and my colleagues who are struggling with this same issue? So I love a term that you said, student loan plan, because I think as I've gotten older, I've realized the value of planning. So I didn't even know that you could plan. So what is a student loan plan? That's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and there's companies that do standalone student loan advice. Now, for our clients, you know, we're doing comprehensive financial planning, so student loan planning is a part of it.
Right.
And you know, usually I would say at the start, you have 2 routes, right? Are we going to get public service loan forgiveness, or are we going to go for aggressive payoff? Physicians in particular, traditional forgiveness, like the 20-25 year forgiveness, doesn't usually work out. Maybe some specialties that might not be as high income might get there, but it depends on income versus loan balance and, you know, all the noise that comes out. Yeah, and it kind of comes back to the whole point of this conversation. There's still also a concern of trusting the system for 20 to 25 years that you're concerned about. And while the current law says that that's not taxable, we know in 2025 that becomes taxable again.
Right. So
then you have clients that, you know, you're planning this out, and then you're like, well, it's great to have $300,000 forgiven. We now owe $100,000 in taxes. So now for 20 years, we're putting up a side fund, which we call our tax fund, that you're planning for that because you get this forgiveness. All right, great. Now I have to set up a payment plan with the IRS. So now we have that. Like before you know it, like your entire life, you're just paying someone back for these student loans. So, and that's just on the traditional forgiveness, private payoff. I don't want to say it's easier, but it's more straightforward, right? You know, you refinance and you know what you're going to go after. And I think from my side of as an advisor, one of our biggest fears is when, again, physicians, but really anyone with student loans goes to an advisor who may not be as well versed, and the default answer, it's not as common now because rates have gone up, but back, you know, heck, a year, 2 years ago, the default answer was, well, let's just refinance, get a lower rate, we'll pay them off. As soon as you go from a federal loan to a private loan, anything that we may have had in our wheelhouse for PSLF, traditional forgiveness, is now gone.
Goes out the window.
Now it's improved a little bit now in a weird way because rates have gone up, where now your federal rate is probably pretty close to what you're gonna see depending on what term length you're looking at there. But on the federal side then, I mean, different payment plans. I mean, we analyze tax returns every year. Do we do married filing separately, married filing jointly?
Wow.
Is it, you know, I say repay, but obviously that's the new SAVE program. Can we still get into pay? Like, then you get into the weirdness that comes in with, well, if you had a loan before 2007, then you can get into pay. But if none after that, like, there's so many unique things that we do this every day, and I still have to keep a cheat sheet nearby just to follow the dates on these payment programs.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that. You hit the nail on the head. The other issue with these plans is that, number one, and I'm just talking as a taxpayer, as a human being, I have a real issue with our policymakers and our government making it very hard, because there are well-intentioned Americans, taxpayers like myself, that really want to pay their loan off. And I would put myself in that group of aggressive payoffs, because for someone with breast cancer who is a mother during COVID to send her disability payments to the Department of Education and have the Department of Education take $27,000 of money, tax-free money, because this is tax-free money, and put it in your pocket for interest, I have a serious problem with that. But I also want to, because it's not, we can't just have a problem with the system and not actually deal with the issue. So my issue with it is the same that I'm hearing from my other professionals and colleagues, which is no one understands what these policies mean. And just as we're starting to understand what SAVE or forgiveness or PSLF, something will change. Some variable will change. We are actually in a period right now where there's proposed negotiated rulemaking happening actually in DC, which you can watch. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but you can sign up and watch these groups of people with the Department of Education, and they're trying to figure out how much power the Secretary of Education actually has to change some of these really important policies. But I don't think it goes far enough. And I like hearing stories like these, because without these stories, I don't think that our policymakers really understand how serious this problem really is. And if we don't figure this out and simplify it, because I think it could be very simple, then without these stories, it doesn't get put in perspective. So I'm curious, if I told you that there was a proposed bill out there that would allow your clients to refinance the interest on their student loans for current borrowers to 0%, and any future borrowers would have their interest rates capped at 4%. Do you think that would help your clients better plan for either taking out loans or repaying loans? Or would that give you the ability to maybe focus on helping them build their wealth, helping them set aside for retirement, maybe qualifying for a mortgage? Do you think those conversations might change?
Yeah, I mean, that, at the end of the day, you always come back and, like, for our clients and their ages, like, their weighted rate is close to 7%.
Mine is 7.9. That's full disclosure.
Yeah,
my highest loan.
And that's why I always come back to, like, the actual legal side, the political side of it. And you can forgive 10,000, 20,000, but the problem is we haven't addressed the underlying problem still.
Right.
And I don't know when that's addressed, if that's ever addressed. But the fact that, you know, you allow institutions to hand out this amount of money, and you're signing up for this stuff when you're 18 years old. I mean, here I am in my 30s, and I'm still trying to figure this all out. So at 18, you just sign off, and they're like, here you go, you know, enjoy it. So there's so many broken parts in there, but just having some clarity, you know, whether it's 0 or 4% would be really helpful. And what we've seen, use emergency medicine physician doctors as an example, most of them work at academic institutions.
Right.
And, you know, some people, and I'm like you, I'm an individual that paid off my own loans. I didn't, you know, get any type of forgiveness or anything like that. Now my loan balances were much lower. I said, came from a low income household, went to a state school, so we're not talking anything crazy here.
Smart.
But compared to like our
private schools, we should have done what Chad did. I mean, in hindsight, I should have just gone to CUNY, save my pennies for NYU or something, but I'm happy with my choices. But in hindsight, I think for my child, I would do what you did.
And no matter which route you would choose, right? But just knowing like what you're going to have to go after after that is completed. So I think those types of programs would be extremely helpful, and just again knowing that there's other options out there. We always talk about public service loan forgiveness, but we still have physicians that'll join us today and they'll say, I didn't think I applied. Like, I didn't think that applied to me. And we're like, you're literally like the textbook case. Like, I could put your face on a billboard. Like, you were built for this. Like, I don't trust it, or I didn't think it applied to me. And that's sad. And you know, Department of Education now has come out and said a little bit like, hey, our bad. We're going to try to make this easier and more relevant. And sure, they made some improvements, but the fact that we even had to get to that conversation is pretty sad.
Right. So the reason I brought up this bill is because one actually exists. And it's been proposed. So I'm really trying to get feedback from folks, because I'm not saying that one bill solves all problems, but I think it's very important to take these small steps in the right direction so that we can actually address some of these very important pain points, especially for people that are paying back these loans. The Student Loan Interest Elimination Act is a bill that's currently being proposed and co-sponsored by Congressman Joe Courtney, which is my current home state of Connecticut, and Senator Peter Welch, actually, from Vermont. What I didn't know before I learned about this bill is that they've been pushing this for about 9 years. And it's fallen on deaf ears because it lacks bipartisan support. So what I wanted to do was try to bring this outside of a political realm and really bring it down to the ground, right? Because no matter what's going on in our country, the fact is entrepreneurs like you and I and our clients, we're going to work every day. We're trying to raise our kids. You paid off your student loans. I'm trying to pay off my loans. And a lot of people are surprised by that, but there's something in me that the debt doesn't sit well. And I did agree to borrow this money, and whether I was a seasoned borrower or not, I signed a document. I signed a contract, right? We all signed the contract when we took out these loans, promising that we would pay them back. What I don't feel that we signed up for was for any kind of predatory lending or any kind of one-sided, payment relationship where, most of the time with a mortgage, there are no prepayment penalties. For most places aren't, they're more than happy to take your money. Student loans are this interesting creature where you could pay them off for years and your balance will keep growing, or you'll send an excess payment, which in COVID, when I was making my payments, everything was an excess payment because 0 was due. But how do we still apply that money to interest? So I agree with you that there are a lot of gray areas. And folks, the reason I'm doing this video is because it doesn't really matter what level you are in your career or your life. You must take the time to read these plans very carefully. One other thing that I think people don't realize with the SAVE plan, which I already did a video about, that it doesn't go far enough. However, it does change your repayment term. So I was on pay and I did apply for SAVE, but it made sense for my age and where I am in my life. But it does extend my payment term by 5 years. So from 20 years, forgiveness after 20 years, now I'd have to wait 25. For those of you who have applied and have been approved and decide you don't like it because you saw this video, you have until July of next year to switch back to your original plan. So these are little things that people don't know about these plans, but they could be very useful if you work with someone like Chad and you realize, oh my God, we're in this phase of our life. It actually makes sense to stay on pay and aggressively pay this off. And then, you made a really important point about planning to pay for the IRS. So for those of us who are paying student loans, we're paying the Department of Education right now. But if part of our loans are forgiven, or if we don't pay our loans, we're either going to have wages garnished, in Social Security, which I understand from other IRS professionals, it's very hard to do. The only other time they can do that is to garnish child support payments and other similarly serious priority payments. Or you'd be working with someone like Chad, and you'd have to actually perhaps create a savings or some kind of high yield savings, and then the next person you're going to be paying is the IRS, because it is taxable income when it's forgiven. So your clients are not only thinking about how do we get rid of student loans, but if we can't do this, we need to have a backup. We need to have a plan B, because we're going to possibly owe money to the IRS for the amount of money that was forgiven. I miss air quotes. I'm a 90s baby.
Yeah.
Forgiven.
I do air quotes. Well, and the crazy part is it's added to your current income. So if you're already a physician or an attorney, it's added to your taxable income. So if you're already doing pretty good in life and then you have this forgiven, you are flying through the highest tax brackets.
So it's a windfall.
So yeah, it's a huge, like, it spikes.
Wow.
It's not like it's a separate little island. So
see, that I didn't know.
Yeah.
So this is my concern, Chad, and this is why I'm so passionate about this bill. I have decided that I would like to help my local congressman push this forward, because I do think, in my case, I borrowed $179,000 originally, principal, and in 6 years that became $228,000. Now, if I could just pay back my principal, I think I could actually pay it off. And I think as a human being, as an entrepreneur, as someone that's passionate about financial freedom and living debt-free, it's actually motivating and encouraging that I could pay off $179,000 by myself, because I'm a licensed attorney, because my studies paid off, because all my parents' sacrifices paid off. I could do more stuff with my children. I could show my son, hey mom, how could you buy a house that's $250? Well, you know, mommy paid off her student loans, and we changed laws. We made it possible for other people to do this. So one of the reasons, and I kind of say this publicly, Chad, you may or may not know this, but one of the reasons I don't agree with cancellation is because it's not fair for the folks who already paid back their loans. You know, how do we, I don't want to say compensate, but you should be able to derive some kind of benefit from these new laws, because the truth is that student loans affected all of our lives. I'm sure there are sacrifices that your family made. You mentioned your beautiful wife, Mari, and your 3 children. And I'm sure that when you were aggressively paying off those loans, your wife at some point was like, okay, are we almost done with this? Because we have 3 kids and we need to go on a vacation and we need to have a life, honey. Yeah. These are the conversations I have with my husband. But it's so admirable what you did. And I know others that have paid off their loans. So one of the things that we've proposed, that I'd like to propose in this comment period, is for folks that have paid off maybe their loans in the last 10 years, perhaps there are some tax breaks, or there are some other tax advantages that we can extend to those folks who were not in default, who really in good faith worked hard to pay off their loans. I don't think it's fair for taxpayers to subsidize education, because some of them didn't decide to go to college. Some of them have run their families' businesses. Some of them have had other means. But I think there is a way for us to meet in the middle without being burdens upon one another. And so that's why I think this bill might be something in the right direction. I'm not saying it solves all our problems, but I also think it's important for both sides of the aisle to come together and realize that student loans is not a political issue, and it really is a human, very earthly, very real financial decision, and it affects every aspect. I mean, in my life, how I raise my family, student loans is a big part of that plan.
And I use the note that I paid off my loans to kind of say that same point. And like I say we, my wife is actually my high school sweetheart, so literally we paid off those loans.
Yeah.
And we come into it with a neutral opinion on like, hey, we're here to help our clients. And whether that's cancellation or forgiveness, and I know we discussed this, it still comes back to like the bigger problems are not being addressed. That
Right.
we're even getting to these points that we have to talk about canceling loans.
Right.
Well, why are we there first? And that's, I think, always the bigger conversation. And I mean, heck, one of our largest clients from a student loan perspective that had that forgiven, we posted that win on social media, just like the forgiveness letter,
Right.
and how it was. And you would be amazed by how many people will like fight back. And I know I brought up emergency medicine physicians earlier, but the reason why I use that as an example is they're seeing a decline, in the match program, that there's not as many physicians. And I always come back and say, if you remove public service loan forgiveness, you're gonna see that number plummet.
Absolutely.
Because that's probably your most common form of academic medicine. And for most physicians, one of your biggest upside, one of your biggest benefits is PSLF, public service loan forgiveness.
Right.
No matter what your stance would be on cancellation, PSLF, paying them off aggressively on your own, we shouldn't be in that spot that has to even be like this, almost like painful to have the conversation,
Absolutely.
right?
I've made it a point that this shouldn't be something painful. We're just trying to pay our bills, right? We're entrepreneurs, we're creating jobs, we're doing a lot of things that are providing opportunities for people. But if our clients, if our friends, if our families are not able to deal with this very real problem, because I do feel that student loans is going to be like the next bubble. Chad, I want to thank you so much. This was such a treat considering we met 2 hours ago. Thank you all for watching. We're here live from FINCON in New Orleans. Chad, Chubb, thank you so much. My name is Lorraine Galvis. Thank you for joining us. God bless and be well.